Dzień dobry, witam Państwa serdecznie na 60. Krakowskim Festiwalu Filmowym, który odbywa się w tym roku online. Za moment będziecie Państwo świadkami fantastycznej rozmowy Kai Klimek z reżyserką filmu Mój ojciec w roli ojca. A ja chciałam Państwa zachęcić do oglądania filmów i do oglądania spotkań z twórcami. Tych spotkań mamy bardzo dużo i jakże interesujące historie w tych spotkaniach można poznać. Hello Mo.
Hi.
Hello. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for being with us, and just please join us for the festival, even that it's online, but still we are open with our Q&As for all the world. Okay, Kaya, the stage is yours, so let's start. Thank you.
Thank you. Dziękuję, Basiu. So maybe first few words in Polish. Dzień dobry, drodzy Państwo. Debiutujemy w live'ie. Już wcześniej inne spotkania z twórcami miałam okazję prowadzić, jak zwykle w festiwalowym nastroju. Akredytacja jest zeszłoroczna, do boju. Zachęcam Was serdecznie do zadawania pytań. A teraz zmieniam język na angielski, bo klasycznie Mo się ładnie uśmiecha, ale pewnie ni w ząb nie rozumie tego, co ja mówię. Hello Mo, nice to see you. I'm sorry for those few words in Polish, but I really wanted to say hi to our audience. And yeah, I'm like the festival crew thing with the accreditation, so I'm really happy that we can meet in that way. I know that you are in Rome now, and you already told me that the situation is improving, so I hope it's going to also be opening up for you to be able to explore the world and just probably work on your other project. But now we need to talk a bit about this super interesting film that you made with Jorge and Jorge. It's a really strong story, I must admit. It just really was like punching in my heart in a way, to be honest. I can imagine that it was also really interesting, long and difficult process for you. But can you at first take us a bit back, like how that happened? Because we are here, you are making a film about making a film. You are like behind the scenes. It's like a meta cinema kind of project. But can you tell us what was the initial point when you started to work on this story? How that happened? Jorge asked you, or you asked Jorge? What was the deal in there?
Well, it was a mix of both. So the original plan was we were going to, so Jorge is my fiance. So that's not explicitly made clear in the film because it isn't just, yeah, it wasn't that important to the story necessarily. But basically, Jorge, I've been wanting to, he's been living outside of Venezuela since, so I met him outside of Venezuela, but I was really curious. I wanted to go with him to Venezuela when he was going to make his film anyway, as his partner, and also just to like get to know the place and possibly look at making my own films there or have a new project there or just learn Spanish finally and meet his family. And he was like, you're going to be so bored on this film set. Would you want to shoot our making of? And I said, sure. That would be interesting. It would be cool to be on a narrative film set because the films I've made are mostly documentary, but they have also some fictional elements, but they never have a set with 30 people and, you know, the whole thing. So I basically thought that I would go and make this film about him making this difficult film with his father and all the kind of technical challenges of that in Venezuela, a country where it's extremely difficult to do anything, even pay for a Coca-Cola, let alone because the money is almost worthless at this point. So the simplest things are very hard there. So how does someone make a movie there? There were all these conflicts that could have potentially been interesting ones for a making of that would have been quite exciting. And I did shoot part of that making of, but then I became very unconcerned with that making of because I found that his father, I finally got to meet his father in Venezuela, who I just call Father to keep it easy because they're both named Jorge. And Father and I started to see that Father, as he was learning how to be an actor, because he's a non-actor, but Jorge was having him do these acting exercises where he can access his real emotions. I was learning that Father really had a lot to explore and in himself from his past, which Jorge's film is based on his father's real past. And his father really does have issues with substances like alcohol and these things. And so Father dealing with those things in Jorge's film, he was ready to do that, or he was wanting to really put himself into that. And so then I became quite fascinated with well, how far are they going to take this? Because they trust each other and they love each other, but there's also been a lot of distance between these two men. There's a lot of fear involved in putting yourself out there, your own father putting himself out there, his own story, his own past, his own demons, you know, that he doesn't necessarily want to explore, but then does because he's getting into this filmmaking and he's doing it for his son. He's kind of doing it for himself too. So basically that took off and that became the film. And so at that point, you know, Jorge said, you know, make whatever you want to make because he cares about me and he respects my work and he likes what I do. So he was like, sure, if you don't want to make it a traditional making of, then just do whatever it is and we're there to support you. And I was like, great, just don't look at the camera, keep doing your thing and I'm going to do my thing. And a father plays himself as the result of that.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask about the rules that you set for yourself, because famous Polish documentary filmmaker has this like decalogue of 10 points. His name is Jacek Bławut, and I really admire him. And one of the points is be aware that sometimes you have to turn off the camera, for example, that there is this kind of point of no return. So for yourself, as a filmmaker making a film that is yours at the same time, but you're telling their story, did you set any rules of that kind? Because I wanted to ask you about the rules that you had with Jorge, but as you said, it feels like it was carte blanche. You can just do whatever you want and film us doing this. But did you feel that there are actually some limits of what you do?
Yes, I had rules. Well, okay, so I had some rules with the characters in a way. They can always tell me if they don't want me to film something, and that is partly to display trust in them, you know, and like to try to get them to trust me. But it's also because I've never had someone say stop filming. If someone does do that and they're not the kind of person I usually end up continuing to make a film with because they're not ready for that or they're not they're just not willing to kind of let me see everything, knowing that, you know, I'll edit things later and blah blah blah. So yeah, I mean, it's something I would respect if the person said stop filming me, I don't want you to film me right now, but it actually has never happened for me with the films I've made so far. So in this case, that same rule was there. I said, father, especially to father, you know, if you ever don't want me to film, you have to tell me. Otherwise, I'm going to film a lot of things. And I thought that, you know, I was quite ruthless with that in terms of me just continuing to film. I film for a very long time. When I'm filming and I'm very interested in someone or something or their reactions, I want to study them for a very long time. Of course, there's days that nothing important or interesting or even emotional at all is happening. Like people are just sitting around drinking Kool-Aid. I'm not going to like film that. So there's plenty of things I don't film as well. But when I am filming, I film for very long. And so I thought I was a bit ruthless about that kind of thing. But I found that actually there were times that I wanted to break my own rule and stop filming because I started to feel this feeling that I hope is transposed in the film itself, which is a feeling of emptiness or something like we've touched too close to the bone. And so those things were quite difficult to film because I love these two men and it's not like I'm saving them by not filming, you know, I can always not include things in the movie or whatnot. It's more just the process of actually watching it and studying it through a lens becomes painful for me too. But because they were pushing each other so much and because they were always oscillating between, and this is something that Venezuelans do a lot, but also, you know, a lot of people do a lot, and a lot of men, but a lot of people oscillate between an intense, you know, crying and laughter is like kind of how some of these things are dealt with them. Is things got very intense and then they kind of come out of it and be like, hey, okay. And I found that to be very jarring and very oscillating, but at the same time fascinating. And that kind of kept me like, okay, they're pushing each other, but they're able to deal with it. You know, no one's having a mental breakdown. Like nobody's dying over this. So like, I'm going to just keep filming. And it taught me how to be more ruthless really as a filmmaker because I had to just trust, you know, that whatever was happening in front of the camera was happening anyway. And that if they were ready for it, that means they were kind of putting themselves in front of me, like they're ready for it for me too. And then all of that had to be dealt with in the edit in terms of how much is included that they actually wanted to be seen. It turns out a lot, because they're just as ruthless with representation of themselves as well. So I hope all of that made sense.
Yeah, of course, it definitely does, because in this film, like, they played some roles, they play themselves on top of that, and somebody has to be like a bit outside of this situation just to, control what's reality and what's not. Because when I watched your film, I had this feeling that in many cases the father was just like, the father, but also the son, that they were pushing because there was this other camera going on. That's, they are acting in the acting. So it's a really meta situation. And it's good that you are so, like, ruthless is the word, to just keep the, the limits of your own story. Because I can imagine, and if I may ask you that you were also not only filming, but they were talking to you. Outside of the situation of filming. So because we can see that the relationship between the father and the son is really loaded, let's use that word. And as you said, thank you for sharing your personal life with us, that your relationship with Jorge, the son, is emotional. But how would you describe, if you may, the relationship you had with the father? Because sometimes we have those beautiful shots of him standing in the nature, and there's so much serenity and so much calm. And I was thinking, like, oh, so he must have done that for her in a way, just like being him in that way. So I wanted to ask you, like, how did it work in between you? Because we have those scenes that he talks that, oh, Mo shot that already, like, leave me alone, I'm not going to shoot it again. So you are there, but at the same time, you are sometimes only with him. So I was curious how that worked.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think I'm drawn to this certain character. It was the protagonist of my last film called Mbesa, and the kid was 10 years old. In this case, the kid was 51 years old, and he's my father-in-law in a way. But yeah, I mean, there was something, I think that's part of also why I decided to make the film I was going to make, and why it is a father plays himself, is that it's driven by my curiosity about someone like Father, who is very himself, kind of unapologetically, and at the same time has a lot of, he's very self-destructive, so is at very, very odds with himself. But he has a kind of tumultuousness, or like a turbulence inside of him that's very strong. And the kid in my last film, it was more kind of darkness or sadness, and with Father, it was more of an anger and a violence almost inside of himself. At the same time, that person is tempered, and the kid was like this too, with an insane sense of tenderness. And for Father, in a kind of machismo culture, but something he really buys into is this macho camacho thing. And I never buy that kind of thing, because I mean, I've been close to men my whole life. I have brothers. I have really good friends that are men. Most of my close friends are men. And not specifically because they're men and I'm a girl, but I think I just got used to this, like, oh, okay, there's that side of you, and then there's like the tender side of you, which you'll always give me, because it's like you need it just like I do, everybody does, and you just decide to do it with women, but you don't do it with other men because you feel, I don't know why, I'm not a man. Either way, Father has this tenderness, and it's not that he wouldn't like change around me per se. I can say that their relationship started the way that I bring up the kid from my last film, because it started in a similar way, where because I have a camera and I'm watching him all the time, he's not interacting with me, but he's feeling seen by me. So we're getting closer because he's feeling like I'm watching everything that he does. So when someone makes a joke, he knows that I know exactly the way he laughs, because I'm listening to him, and he knows that I know what he thought was funny and what he didn't, and the way his face changed, because all he knows is Mo is sitting there with the lens right on him all the time. And it's a weird thing. It makes me feel closer to a person if they're wanting that, and it makes them feel close to me if they're wanting that too. This feeling of being watched in a kind of ally way or something. So basically, Father was always really respectful of me, and like there were times that that actually I enjoyed spending time with him without the camera, with turning it off and going on these nature walks. I mean, of all people in the crew, they were all working, and Father on his days off, he would be like the most adventurous one and want to go and be in the jungle, because he used to spend time there when he was younger in his real life. He went to this part and he was a part of this, and he was around this indigenous community and this beautiful nature. And he's an adventurous person who loves flowers and like gardening and all these like things, butterflies, all these things that are not macho camacho, but that he could share with me, maybe because I'm a woman or maybe because I was just looking at him watch them and I liked them. But we became quite close over these moments. And so I saw that as a part of him, you know. It was important to me in the edit too to not make it like he's a crazy guy who then, so here's the good and here's the bad. Like here's the bad where he's crazy and here's the good where he looks at butterflies. It's no, he's actually both at the same time all the time. Like all of us are contradictions. And that's what makes us beautiful. So I think my relationship with Father was trying to see how he saw and trying to understand where his fears lie with being represented by his son, and then lean into those fears to really listen to them on how I was going to represent him.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it kind of reminds me of those relationship between like kind of sometimes it's like with friends, especially you said a lot of friends in your life. I also do, and sometimes you just don't talk with them, you just do things together, you just walk or go on a trip and just explore the world, and that's how you connect, right? By looking at things basically and experiencing them. So I kind of had this feeling that that was the case in between you, that you don't need to talk much because you are just there in the same place and that connects you. But tell us a bit about, because you are also a cinematographer, and this is obvious in this project that this is you looking at them without taking the eye, even if the emotions on the faces of the characters or the situation is so terrible, like they are like fighting and Jorge is losing his temper. I mean, both of them are sometimes doing this, but you decided also to not only include those parts that you are there making the film about the film, but also those beautiful landscapes and also the materials from the past. I mean, the home videos and the archive. So that happened, that was your plan, you already had the access to the archives before, or that happened on later stage of the project? And like tell us a bit about that, because you are this kind of cinematographer that is like a dog following everything that happens, but also the one that is like, you know, observing the majesty of the nature and also digging through the archives and illustrating that. So tell us a bit about that part of the process, please.
Well, I have a cool story that's one of those magical documentary stories about the archival. I can say that the jungle felt like Father's a different person in Caracas. I can tell you that. He lives with his family, and he's very like kind of straight and narrow during the day, and then has these kind of adventures and all kinds of, I don't know. He lets out some of this anger, this other stuff in ways that are more like suppressed in the city. Then he gets out into the jungle and he's actually in tune with nature, and I can feel he's super affected by these landscapes. So I knew that they had to be a part of the film. And the tepui, which is the mountain structure that you see in the film that looks like it's a mountain that gets cut off, those tepuis are quite famous in Venezuela. And I actually didn't even know until we were there. I had this the place we were shooting is called Canaima. It's a beautiful place, also very famous. It has Angel Falls, the highest waterfall in the world. And I'd seen a picture of this waterfall in this tepui structure that's very unique when I was very little, but I forgot until I got there and saw the tepui again. And I was like, I've been wanting to come here since I was like 5 or whenever I saw this picture in National Geographic or something. So it's a very magical place though, because when you're there, you kind of get sucked into this nature and it makes you it's like you put your finger on an electric, on a like small electric thing that's vibrating still, and it's like you're like in tune with something that you've never been in tune with before. It's a very strange place. So I wanted to kind of include that with the sounds of the crickets and this kind of existential space that your head can go to, because Father was going there, I was going there. It's very strong. So that's in terms of capturing the landscapes and kind of incorporating them with the story and the character. Sometimes the landscapes can be oppressive, where the crickets are screaming at you like they're being murdered. And sometimes the landscapes are incredibly serene, and it's a way for Father to escape this film pressure and all this other things that he feels. So then when it comes to the archival, so I shot this film the way I shot the film, the way I felt I should have shot it, the way I just saw it. And it turns out it was a quite obsessively shot thing. I mean, you could look at my footage and make a making of out of the first parts of it, but then you realize that this girl is really just like staring at these two guys in their faces for like 2 months, with some landscapes and these other things in the jungle. But I was just so focused on trying to study their emotions, because they're not super, they don't sit and have a talk. Hey, Father, I love you. I want to talk to you about this. They never do that. It's all, everything is in the face and it's all very small, but they have to, but it's there, you know, or I believed it was there. So basically in the course of that, I just had this focus that was always kind of around other things and then pointing though at them and always zooming in on them, kind of, it's not truly metaphorically. And then the archival was, Jorge finished his film, which is finished film, by the way. I finished shooting this film about them making their film. We leave Venezuela, and Father one day sends us a picture and says, look what I found, this tapes in the house, in his grandparents' house. So we go and get them developed, and there's this incredible role of archival of father and son being together when they were younger that I had never seen, that Jorge had never seen. And at one point in it is this shot that I use at the end of the movie that is shot pretty much by the grandfather, by Father's father, Jorge's grandfather. He shoots something that is like exactly the tone and the way that I would have shot something, but he just like did it, 20 years ago. And it's of the two men in a hammock together, or like not men, actually. Jorge's a little child and Father's there with him with a cat, and the cat that they have a story about, and they're in this hammock and Grandpa's shooting around the trees and then zooms in, and it's incredible because it's exactly how I would have shot archival if I could go back in time. So the archival made its way into the film in that way. At first, I wanted to kind of show who Father was in the past, like his real life in the jungle, that he did go into Puys and that he was a party guy. So maybe I was thinking of using a little archival at the beginning, that's it. But the film ended up using a little bit more, but not too much, because it was very precious and it says a lot when it's left small. And that excavation was really kind of handed to me by fate in this kind of strange way.
But that's really interesting, especially the part that you said that it felt like you would shoot it if you had the chance, because I was like looking at it and I'm like, this is the cat. That's the cat that I was talking about. So it's like really continuity works in a spectacular way across time and spaces. So that's like a really interesting part of the process also. I have a question from the audience, actually, and it's also one that I wanted to ask you, and you started to answer that, but because I wasn't really sure when I was watching the film if the film would even happen. I mean, the film that they are making, because there's always those problems. It feels like Werner Herzog, Klaus Kinski in the jungle once again. Story repeats itself. It's going crazy, and it's. I guess that this kind of relationship we can feel in our heads if we watched Herzog films or Apocalypse Now. It feels like it's going off rails. The film is going to explode in front of our eyes. So one of the viewers is actually asking about the film. The film exists even? We can watch it anywhere? What's the story with that?
Yes, so Jorge finished his film. It's called La Fortaleza, which is the fortitude, but it goes by the Spanish title. I think it's best because it has a double meaning. La Fortaleza was at Rotterdam this year in Tiger competition. And it was starting to do quite well. And then, coronavirus hit right after. So now the film is still in festivals, but festivals are being decided. It's quite difficult to kind of figure out a sure path. So I'm not sure when, but it'll be released online and everything else eventually. It's just a matter of things being kind of delayed for now. And actually they were going to, so the premiere of El Father was at Visions de Vel. And before they turned it to the online one, we were going to do, the in-person festival, and they were considering doing both films together one night to see what kind of conversations came up. And unfortunately that, because the physical festival was canceled and they went online, that was not possible. So we are still waiting for the opportunity to show the films together in some sort of way so that because whether you see mine first or his first, you're seeing very, very different, not just viewpoints of father and of a process, because his is a fiction film. So you're actually immersed in that process and you don't think about process. You're more thinking about the story. But anyway, also just very different forms, like very different forms of filmmaking in the same place with the same protagonist. And mine includes the other protagonist, Jorge. But so yeah, that's the story right now. I mean, we kind of, my film isn't like a promotion, like as you can tell, of Jorge's film per se. So, and it's not a making of necessarily. They're both kind of independent films, but we are really excited for when they're together. And so we'll be sharing on our Facebook on all this stuff where we're announcing stuff about our father. I'll be always saying where their film is going to, because I want people to be able to see both and kind of extrapolate from either one.
Yeah, that really makes sense, because that would show a different layer of the story and different perspective. I would be really curious to watch it myself. I hope that I'm going to have a chance one day to do that. But can you tell me, because actually your film is like fiction / non-fiction on so many levels. We were talking about that. What's your like fascination with this kind of cinema? It's really interesting for me personally, because I think that documentary as a pure thing doesn't really exist. It's impossible, because there are those subjective choices and somebody is playing somebody all the time. So it's always like cinema itself. But you like to cross this border. It's not the first project, as far as I know that you do that. So can you tell us a bit about that? Because that's really interesting. Like, what kind of documentary filmmaking at this point as an artist you believe in? Or what's the deal with that? Because that's like a bigger question that your film also is asking, like who is the owner of the story? What's the reality? Where are the real emotions? How the camera changes the situation? Like all of that. I know it's like a long question, but I'm really curious about your answer. So please go ahead.
Well, I totally agree with you. I went to journalism school, so they're gonna like take away my diploma for saying this, but I totally agree with you that there's no objective truth. There's no. And I think I'm actually at this point a little even anti these films that really stand on a pedestal and say like it was like this, and I'm telling you exactly how the world was and is. It really grates at me the way that journalism tone used to when I worked in journalism for only maybe 1 year out of school. Not because everybody needs to be like purposely stretching form and fictionalizing things for the sake of fun or fiction or story, but because it doesn't say anything, it doesn't pose any new questions. I really don't like I don't like engaging with work that or kind of a tone that is non sequitur, that isn't posing more questions and provoking more thought. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about cinema, is that an image can mean 9 million things. And then an image with sound can mean 9 million billion things, and it's whatever we want to take from it. But it's obviously very guided by the director deciding what are their own interests and what are their own pains and how are they going to explore them through this image and the sound. So it's a very amazing opportunity then to work with people who are willing to share their reality with you. They're willing to be as honest with you, the filmmaker, as they can be by just saying, go ahead, film everything. That's a gift. But then you should use it by honoring what you think is the best way to transpose what their truth is, but your truth blended with their truth, because otherwise, what else are you saying? Otherwise, you're kind of appropriating their way of seeing things, which like you're a different person, so you don't actually know. And I think the more you lean into a kind of interpretation and you say, this is truly an interpretation by taking these risks, and that the more you provoke new thoughts about why are we doing this anyway. I mean, in this case, it's a very particular thing. It's a very, like you said, meta film, where it's a film about a film and about representation within a film, and the anxieties are about who gets to own the story. And I become sometimes me and my editor felt like we were the puppeteers in a way, because we were saying, oh no, but we're the documentary. And so therefore, everything just happened. Well, in reality, I had no control in my past film I did. I made the kid go do all kinds of things. But in this film, I had no control over their production because they were very busy and I didn't want to get in the way. But also I didn't want to. I just wanted to see what happened. But obviously I have control over the way that things are represented. I have control over this frame being in there for an extra 3 seconds where someone's face changes. And so it's interesting to play with that line, because I hope that it provokes questions about who owns a story. And I hope that it does show you actually the way that I see the world, even though I'm not in the movie and I'm not talking and I'm in a mirror shot for like 2 seconds, but I'm not like in the film. This is the most me I've ever put myself in a film, even though I'm completely focused on others. It's through the lens that you really hopefully get to see the way I see things, which is from this estranged but also close point of view.
Yeah, I kind of do it, and I can completely agree with you. And as you said, 9 billion more things, I would have 9 billion more questions. But as I know, we need to probably wrap our meeting up. I think we have to wrap this up, but I have to ask one more question, and without that, we're not going home, I would say. So I hope that the technical crew is going to forgive us. But I wanted to ask you, do you think, like you as Mo, that the fact that your film exists and that you were there and that they probably, of course, they have seen it, did it change anything in their relationship? If you can just briefly answer that, because I would feel that our conversation is incomplete without that question.
Yeah, I do. I think it did. I mean, because there's certain things that when you do any strong art project and at the end of it, you look at the result as something good, and Father's a very good actor in La Fortaleza, you can start to forget all what went into that. And this is a way of not forgetting. And the good stuff and the bad stuff, but all the stuff, all the mixed emotions, all the kind of hollow feeling, all the kind of guilt from the past, all the things. It's a way of kind of not forgetting what went into this project. And for Father, I think it's a way of not forgetting the things that he remembers as well. Like, anyway, it's not like he went away from it saying the movie went great. Actually, all of us went away from it very confused about how we felt about reality and about each other and all kinds of things. This movie is a way to process, maybe. And so, not maybe, I know it has been. So I can say that it's made a massive difference in that way, and I think it will in the future too.
Oh, good. That makes me really happy. As a non-strong believer in the therapy through film, I believe in therapy. I still think that there is a possibility of like starting a change, and great that you answered that question, because now I feel that we have the whole story of the story in a way that we can have a story in those little windows now. So thank you for meeting us and making time to talk about your film. I hope we're going to have a chance to watch La Fortaleza, just to see those two versions of the same story in a way. I hope to meet you one day so we can talk more about fiction, non-fiction, as the strong true believers in this kind of filmmaking. Thank you, Mo, and have a great day. It was lovely to meet you, really.
Yes, this was really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.